It was the evening of March 3, 2021. A young woman by the name of Sarah Everard was abducted in South London, England, as she was walking home to the Brixton Hill area from a friend's house near to Clapham Common. Everard, a university graduate who was working in marketing, was kidnapped by a Metropolitan Police constable by the name of Wayne Couzens. Couzens was crafty, using COVID lockdown rules to fool Everard into submission, at which time he handcuffed her, placing her into his rental vehicle. A haulage vehicle traveling down the same busy road would capture Couzens, showing Everard a card. Like with other predators, Couzens had a history of sexual-related offences that weren't properly handled or investigated by the British police. 2 instances have Couzens exposing himself to women working at a McDonald's in Kent. One such incident took place on February 27, not long before Sarah was reported missing. It should come as no surprise that these terrible experiences left the victims feeling vulnerable, upset, shaken, and angry. McDonald's workers noted down his vehicle registration details and these were given to police, but no action was taken. Couzens was nicknamed the Rapist by his colleagues in his former job, working for the Civil Nuclear Constabulary. He joined back in 2011 and was stationed at Dungeness, which is on the coast of Kent. His nickname stuck up until the time that he transferred over to the Metropolitan Police Force in 2018. Given the twisted nickname and his behavior leading up to Sarah's murder, it should come as no surprise that his female co-workers felt afraid and uncomfortable around him. People close to him knew what type of person he was. Going so far back as 2002, co-workers were aware that he was obsessed with violent pornography and frequently abused substances. On one hand, his colleagues were fully aware of what he was. On the other, his family were fooled with a completely different personality. Couzens knew how to flip the script depending on the people around him. Despite this nickname, Couzens had managed to retain his position and was even carrying firearms legally at this time. At the time of Sarah's murder, he was working for London's Metropolitan Police as part of parliamentary and diplomatic protection. This role was similar to his Civil Nuclear Constabulary role in that this position also granted Couzens legal access to carry firearms. In a country where obtaining firearms is oftentimes a lengthy and unsuccessful procedure, someone like this having access to them is worrying to say the least. Everard's boyfriend described Sarah as being someone who was street savvy and intelligent. The 33-year-old had called him on the night that she went missing. He recalled the phone call that they'd shared as she walked home that night. In this phone call he indicated that Sarah was in positive spirits, as she had just met up with a friend in the Clapham Junction area of London. He would also mention that Sarah didn't sound like she was intoxicated, despite having purchased a bottle of wine just prior to arriving at her friend's house. We're all aware that being under the influence of alcohol can make you an easier, more susceptible target to someone looking to do you harm. However, Sarah clearly didn't feel in danger because she was upbeat, walking along a constantly busy road. Predators like Couzens know how to manipulate and fool innocent people. They don't just wake up one morning and decide to commit crimes such as this. Like with other offenders, Couzens had pre-planned the crime months in advance. It would be learned that in the months leading up to Everard's abduction, Couzens had made what was described as reconnaissance trips to the city. He wanted to look for places to abduct unsuspecting young women. On February 10, 2021, Couzens had purchased a handcuff key from Amazon. He already had a pair of police-issued cuffs and he was looking forward to abusing his position of power in the worst way imaginable. On February 28, he travelled from his home in Deal, Kent to another town that he knew well, Dover. Dover is known for its white cliffs, port and historic castle. Couzens had grown up in the town and worked at his dad's garage before joining Kent Police. It was in Dover that Couzens hired his rental vehicle. Just minutes after booking this rental car, Couzens made an order for self-adhesive carpet protector. This was going to prevent forensic and DNA transfer from a victim to the inside of his vehicle. It should be highlighted that Couzens was married and had 2 children. He made up a lie to his Ukrainian wife, telling her that he'd be working on March 3rd. This was the night that he'd picked out to abduct a young, defenseless woman. With a plan set in place to abduct an unsuspecting woman, Couzens picked up his rental car on March 3rd and drove up to London. At 8 p.m., Couzens purchased hairbands from Tesco. Court documents suggest that these were used to either restrain Sarah or maintain an erection during the assault. He would then troll southwest London, in search of lone women. Along a busy road, he spotted Sarah Everard and made up his mind that she would be his target. It is difficult to imagine the fear that Everard was experiencing once she learned that a police officer, someone considered trustworthy by regular people, had evil intent. By this time, she was probably trying to reason with him. Couzens left London, driving 80 miles back toward Dover. He had parked his own vehicle out of sight of video cameras and moved Everard into it. It was late by now and hours had passed since the initial abduction. The exact destination isn't known, but Couzens drove to a remote location north of Dover. The areas surrounding Dover are rural and mostly consist of small villages. Couzens raped Everard before murdering her via strangulation. He later told a psychiatrist that he had used a belt. In the early morning hours of March 4, Couzens drove to a petrol station to purchase some drinks. After this, he drove to a plot of land that he owned in Ashford, Kent. Couzens purchased this land with his wife in 2019. ANPR and cell phone evidence verified this. In the coming days, Couzens would buy petrol and other items to dispose of Everard's body. He went to different places in and around Dover to buy these items. At some point, Couzens took Everard's body and burned it in an abandoned refrigerator. Having done this, he discarded her remains into 2 builder's bags and dumped them in a pond on the land that he owned. A sickening detail was the fact that he took his wife and children to the same area for a day out on March 7. Thankfully, Couzens wasn't very smart when it came to getting away with a brazen abduction and murder. The rental vehicle had been booked under his own name, and since London is filled with ANPR and CCTV cameras, it was only a matter of time before he would be caught. Everard's disappearance was extremely unusual and troubling. Her family were rightfully concerned, and to their credit, police jumped onto the case quick, rewinding thousands of hours of camera footage to retrace Sarah's steps. Fortunately, the case grew in public interest by the day, and this put pressure on the police to solve it. Couzens would be confronted at his home in Deal. Upon being questioned about the case, he gave a totally insane story. Couzens told police that a Balkan human trafficking organization had paid him to abduct Sarah Everard. Under fear of violent reprisal to his life, he had handed Sarah to the gang. Nobody believed his BS. To make matters worse for Couzens, visible markings to his head pointed toward a struggle. Couzens continued lying, telling investigators that his dog had scratched him. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Everard's body was discovered on Couzens' land. A subsequent autopsy showed that Everard's body was badly burned, and she was only identified through dental records. Forensic testing showed Couzens' DNA in vaginal swabs taken from Everard. In addition, Couzens' semen and Sarah's blood were located in his vehicle. The sheer amount of evidence sealed Wayne Couzens' fate and ultimately destroyed many lives. He was hit with a whole life tariff, which means that he'll never be released. This case is a tragic and preventable one. Couzens joined the Metropolitan Police in 2018, but it has since come out that he wasn't properly vetted. This raises more concerns about the safety of the public, especially women. It goes to show that you can't put your trust in people operating from these organizations, because you never know who you're really dealing with. I support the police, but realize that this case destroyed the relationship between the public and their organization. Corruption will always be an issue, but people like Couzens should have been taken off the street much sooner. There's no telling just how much more damage he caused, or if he was responsible for other murders or sexual crimes. Sarah Everard's family now have to deal with the heartbreak of losing a child. They know that despite justice having been served, she'll never return home. Her friends will miss her presence, and everyone involved is forever impacted by the decision of a monster. To make matters worse, Couzens' 2 young children now have to live a life of potential mistreatment from classroom peers. They have to grow up knowing that their father committed one of the most high-profile crimes of 2021. Everyone loses, and that's the sad reality of the Sarah Everard case. A situation like this is never going to transform into a positive. However, Sarah Everard's murder gave way to changes in police vetting processes. Hopefully, this can prevent future predators from using the force as a means for committing violent and sexual crimes.